On the 5th day of Cringemas, my YouTube gave to me Christian privilege. Hello YouTube, bridge building heathen here. Now, why are we talking about a form of privilege on a Cringemas video? I thought this might be an interesting topic to cover because much of the YouTube quote-unquote skeptic community is atheist. And while a lot of people in the community critique the idea of privilege, I thought it might be interesting since one of the main social justice criticisms is it's hard to see a form of a privilege if it applies to you. But many of the people in this community, even the straight, cis, white male, are not Christians. Now there are several different lists of Christian privilege, and I picked, I suppose you could say, the most popular one, the most shared one, and of course it's from our friend who made the genderbread person, so this is going to be entertaining. It's also worth noting that for this, a lot of this list focuses on other faiths. In fact, atheists are so othered in discussions of Christian privilege that it's almost like they don't even count. The articles tend to focus more on the ways that Christians put down mostly other faith groups. So in order to even make the list apply in some cases, I'm going to probably bring up religious correlates, which are pantheism, or, Pastafarianism, and secular Buddhism and secular Judaism. It's probably as close as we're going to get. So, you can expect to have time off work to celebrate religious holidays. Well, I certainly don't see anyone getting the solstice off instead of Christmas. In fact, December 25th is one of the few days even Walmart shuts down. So people who celebrate the solstice instead can't exactly trade out. It might also be nice if people had the eclipse off work. And one thing that comes up in the Wikipedia article on the subject is that, well, for those who say that it isn't Christian privilege because, Santa and reindeer don't really have much to do with Christianity, the reply to that is that, well, it's just that Christianity has become so institutionalized. Christmas is just the cultural thing that everybody else has to kind of slip in their little bits because everything is just Christmas. Next, music and television programs pertaining to your religious holidays are readily accessible. Well, this is true. We don't necessarily have any holiday specials with noodly appendages. And we also don't have very many that celebrate the solstice, although a couple of Doctor Who episodes have mentioned it, most notably. It might be nice to have a few more that are just a general solstice thing instead of simply a Christmas thing. It's easy to find stores that carry items that enable you to practice your faith and celebrate religious holidays. We should have more science tools that are carried in a way that the general public might have access to them, perhaps. Of course, stores often carry only what sells, and so, it's unfortunate that doesn't sell, quite honestly. You aren't pressured to celebrate holidays from another faith that may conflict with your religious values. Well, most humanists are fairly amicable to the whole peace and giving nature of the winter holiday season in particular. Well, I suppose if you celebrate Festivus, you're not really too fond of giving so much as wrestling, but it's an interesting set of thoughts. Holidays celebrating your faith are so widely supported, you often forget that they are limited to your faith. For example, wishing someone a Merry Christmas or a Happy Easter without considering their faith. Well, yes, that certainly does happen quite often, doesn't it? You can worship freely without fear of violence or threats. This is true. A lot of pantheists, right along with some of their more new agey cousins, definitely get violence and threats. And this even happens in the US, let alone abroad where some atheists have been punished for having different takes on certain holidays. A bumper sticker supporting your religion likely won't lead to your car being vandalized. Oh yeah, those evolution fish, they've got a history. You can practice your religious customs without being questioned, mocked, or inhibited. So are you getting questioned, mocked, or inhibited for the oh-so-serious celebration of Talk Like a Pirate Day? You may be being oppressed. On the other side of the coin, if you have a more serious celebration of holidays like Earth Day, I've seen that mocked fairly often. If you're being tried in court, you can assume that the jury of your peers will share your faith and not hold that against you in weighing decisions. Well, that certainly happens to atheists. When swearing an oath, you will place your hand on a religious scripture pertaining to your faith. That's becoming more and more common. I mean, it certainly would make a lot more sense for atheists to be able to swear on a copy of, say, Origin of Species instead of the Christian scriptures, or any other religious text for that matter. Well, perhaps the Tao Te Ching for some. Positive references to your faith are seen dozens of times a day by everyone, regardless of their faith. Well, there certainly aren't a lot of very positive representations of atheists. Politicians responsible for your governance are probably members of your faith. Well, that's certainly not true. There are not a lot of atheist politicians, are there? Politicians can make decisions citing your faith without being labeled as heretics or extremists. Well, that also certainly doesn't happen right now. It's easy for you to find your faith accurately depicted in television, movies, books, and other media. I suppose if you watch Cosmos or Planet Earth, you can reasonably assume that anyone you encounter will have a decent understanding of your beliefs. Or, I suppose you could say non-beliefs. Again, this list does sort of leave out atheists. You will not be penalized, socially or otherwise, for not knowing other people's religious customs. We do need a bit more understanding of one another. I know there's a lot of atheists who misrepresent various religious groups, and I know there's a lot of religious groups who misrepresent atheists, and that's something we need to work on. Your faith is accepted or supported at your workplace. Well, if you work in a science lab, atheism certainly is the default. Pretty much not anywhere else. You can go into any career you want without it being associated with or explained by your faith. Notice I just said science labs. Yes, that certainly doesn't always happen with atheists either. Although it would be, speaking of any career you want, I suppose it would be funny to have a few atheist clergy persons. They'd probably actually have to be pantheists or Unitarian Universalists, but, there you go. You can travel to any part of the country and know your religion will be accepted, safe, and you'll have access to religious spaces to practice your faith. Well, you're not exactly going to find very many secular meditation halls in places like Alabama. Your faith can be an aspect of your identity without being a defining aspect. For example, people won't think of you as their Christian friend. I'm sure a lot of atheists get thought of as the quote-unquote atheist friend, actually. You can be polite, gentle, or peaceful and not be considered an exception to those practicing your faith. Well, that certainly, unfortunately, also happens to atheists. Fundraising to support congregations of your faith will not be investigated as potentially threatening or terrorist behavior. I'm not really sure what would qualify as an atheist congregation. Unitarian Universalists? I don't know. Construction of spaces of worship will not likely be halted due to your faith. I mean, secular pantheist/Buddhist meditation halls. I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of them. You are never asked to speak on behalf of all the members of your faith. Well, there are certainly atheists who feel compelled to represent atheism as a whole in a debate all the time, and that's unfortunate. You can go anywhere and assume you will be surrounded by members of your faith. Without special effort, your children will have a multitude of teachers who share your faith. Depends on how high in the educational system they go. Without special effort, your children will have a multitude of friends who share your faith. It is easily accessible for you or your children to be educated from kindergarten through postgrad at institutions of your faith. More postgrad than kindergarten. Disclosing your faith to an adoption agency will not likely prevent you from being able to adopt children. I have definitely heard stories of this from a lot of people who aren't Christian. In the event of a divorce, the judge won't immediately grant custody of your children to your ex because of your faith. Yeah, that happens to a lot of atheists, too. Here we might actually have evidence of systemic oppression, folks. Your faith is taught or offered as a course at most public institutions. Well, yeah, a lot of them have science classes. Sorry, I just had to poke that one there. You can complain about your religion being under attack without it being perceived as an attack on another religion. Oh man, can you imagine if a bunch of atheists came out and be like, atheism is under attack? Yeah, no, that's not going to go over well. You can dismiss the idea that identifying with your faith bears certain privileges. Well, that's simply not phrased well. I mean, if you're belonging to a faith that is actively being oppressed in a country, you're not going to feel like you're privileged, and you're going to be dismissive of it. So I don't know who this is targeting, really. I mean, that's just basically witch hunt logic there. Anyway, this is Bridge Building Heathen, and I just wanted to provide some food for thought and see if anybody feels oppressed currently, because this is actually a point of intersectional social justice that no one can attack a bunch of atheists for sitting there and discussing, because this is a form of supposed oppression that impacts you personally. So you have every room to speak on it by the standards of social justice. So take it apart, dismantle it, examine it as you will. Hopefully this will provide some interesting discussion for some people, and I look forward to seeing what happens with it. As always, this is Bridge Building Heathen. Let's get out there and build some bridges.